Anybody who had caddies in mostly a private club, they thought would be potentially good sales reps because you had to listen and you had to deal with different levels of people. You might be dealing with a CEO one day and then, a cop or a fireman the next.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today, Jeff is interviewing Eastman McGovern. Eastman enjoyed a 35-year career in IT sales and sales management, managing district, regional, as well as worldwide sales teams on both a domestic and international scope. His experience includes selling and managing for Fortune 500 companies, as well as experience with startup organizations. In his career, Eastman estimates that he hired over 400 sales team members and interviewed in excess of 2,000 candidates. His background includes direct sales as well as channel and distribution sales models. He was a part of 3 mergers where he integrated sales teams on a global basis, as well as being part of senior management for a company that successfully completed their IPO. During his career, Eastman had P&L responsibility for North American divisions and managed sales goals in excess of $800 million in sales revenue. Now let's listen as Jeff talks to Eastman.
Welcome to the podcast. Today's guest is Eastman McGovern, former executive sales leader at a lot of different tech companies. And full disclosure, Eastman and I met first day in college at Manhattan College. Go Jaspers. Eastman's had a fantastic career, and I can't wait to dig into it. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Eastman.
Sure, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Great. So I'd like to start with a question that has nothing to do with business or your career, but if your parents were entertaining some guests at the dinner table and they thought you were asleep, and one of the guests, asked your parents, hey, how would you describe Eastman? What are some adjectives, to describe the 6-year-old Eastman? And you were awake to hear them. They thought you were sleeping. What would your parents say about you?
I think they would have said I was active. Even back then, I was a little bit athletic, but I was very rambunctious. I had at 6, I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and I was drastically different than the 4 of them. They were more quiet and introverted, and I was more outgoing and always wanted to do something and know what was next. And they slept a whole lot more than I did back then.
So, what got you interested in sports at such a young age?
I think in the beginning it was something to do. You would see the older kids leaving school early for practice, or you were able to get with a group of people before school or after school and play, handball against the wall or play wiffle ball. It was just a great way to interact with other kids and, frankly, not have to go home.
Exactly. Totally. We're the same age, obviously. Totally agree with that. So obviously, I know you as we went through college together and remained friends. So you're the best fundamentally sound basketball player I ever played with. But was basketball always your favorite sport?
Always.
Yeah.
I think it was my favorite because I could do it by myself in the beginning. You know, my dad put a hoop up in the back and I just shot basketballs all day and all night. Plus, from a young age, I was okay. I was pretty good, or I was not very good at baseball. And things like soccer hadn't emerged in the US. I'd never heard of lacrosse.
Right.
So, you know, basketball kind of became my thing. And more importantly, you could play all year. So,
What about water skiing?
water skiing was something I didn't try until later.
Ugh, that's great. So, again, having played basketball with you many times in college and afterwards, you were just always a very smart basketball player. And how did you hone that skill? Because obviously you can shoot all day long, but you have to play to get smart. How did that come to in fruition?
I remember going to a basketball camp when I was a sophomore in high school, and the leagues were up where you live, John V. Marriott CYO Sports Camp, Putnam Valley, New York.
Right.
And the coaches were either college players or young college coaches. Mike Krzyzewski, when he was at Army, was one of the counselors. And the leagues were the NBA, the ABA, college, and high school. And I started in the ABA. I was the only, I guess, sophomore in the ABA. By the end of the second day, I was down in the high school league.
Mm.
And one of the coaches had told me, and this is an exact quote: white suburban jump shooters are a dime a dozen. You got to figure out how to move the ball and pass the ball and engage your teammates more. I guess they called us chuckers back in the day, but I never met a shot I didn't like. And, you know, that had a great impact. And I found out you got quicker, you got picked quicker in the pickup games at night if you could distribute the ball, play a little bit of defense, and not just kind of worry about yourself. And it always stuck in my mind, even as I progressed through my career. You couldn't be so focused on yourself. You had to kind of be focused on everything around you.
Right. So, so you had I would say, a good career at Monsignor Farrell High School in Staten Island, correct?
Yeah.
Now, what were some of your career highlights in basketball in high school?
Well, we were the first team from Staten Island to make it into the CHSAA playoffs in New York City.
Oh, wow.
So our first game, we played Monte Cristi, who had a guy by the name of Red Bruin, who went to Syracuse. Guy by the name of Phil Tiny Smith, who's a 4-year starter at New Mexico. And the guy I covered happened to be a freshman. His name was Vern Fleming, and he played about 17 years in the NBA. And
Right.
I guess if there was a betting line then, would have been Monte Cristi by 30. We beat him in double overtime.
Wow.
First time any Catholic school from Staten Island had won a game. Then we played Cardinal Hayes, who had a guy named Jimmy Black, who unfortunately I tried to cover. Jimmy Black was the point guard on the Dean Smith's first championship team in North Carolina. And he didn't have that many on me in the first half. I think he had 28 in the first. That's the first half.
The first half,
And,
right?
yeah, halftime, coach had said to me, "You know, Dean Smith's here, right?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, you can start covering the guy now." So, you know, we had lost that, but I think that experience was Farrell had great teams, but you know, great players. I think that we had great players. There's an award in Staten Island called the Jakes Award. It goes to the most outstanding player. um, in Staten Island. Something very interesting. Farrell has had 6 of them, and 5 of the 6 came from my parish.
Wow.
They all played for Our Lady Queen of Peace.
Wow.
So it was kind of interesting where you can see a foundation. At Queen of Peace, we started in the 2nd grade.
Wow.
Little, I wouldn't even call it intramurals. It was practices and fundamentals and clinics. And then 3rd and 4th grade, you were playing intramurals. And 5th grade, you played CYO. So it was a very basketball centric parish and school. And, back then we didn't really understand, or I didn't understand recruiting, that there were Division II schools and Division III schools that you could attract. And my coach, I'm still friendly with him today, was only 7 or 8 years older than we were.
Wow.
So he great basketball coach. Didn't really know about sending videos, contacting other coaches, didn't have a lot of contacts. And the good news is, if he had known then what he knew now, I'm sure for me he would have contacted a bunch of D3 schools. Then I might not have met you at Manhattan
Exactly. So
College.
I'm glad that didn't happen, but
Yeah,
yeah.
but
So
that's one
yeah,
of the interesting things now, that people, if you're pretty good, there's a whole slew of areas you can play.
right. Yeah, we were just, I think, used to um, the big schools and,
Right.
UCLA's, the Notre Dames, and watching teams like that play, not even considering, playing at, somewhere else.
Yeah.
So interesting. So obviously you're competitive. A lot of salespeople I know played sports. So help me, and we'll dive into your kind of your career trajectory. But how do you think, being interested in the sports and having the basketball background, and obviously covering a host of great players, how did that shape your professional career in sales and sales leadership?
It's a great question. I remember I had gone to an interview skills workshop when we were going to hire 200 sales reps. And we went out and they sent us to a pretty high end interviewing school. And they talked about athletes. Look for athletes, you know, look for guys in good shape, look for a 42 regular. And I wasn't a 42 regular then, but I definitely wasn't a 48 regular either. And their thought was, competition. You want to be better. You're self-driven. And people who were athletic tend to understand, put in extra time. They always thought that salespeople, the more time you put in, the harder you work, the better you could become. And that kind of migrated towards, athletes. And I know if you look at companies like EMC or Computer Associates, who have been known for these hard charging, cutthroat sales guys, all athletes,
Right.
all team sports too. They weren't going and looking for the guy who was a good golfer.
Right.
Although I think later on in life that kind of changed. But just competitive and a work ethic where you'd go to school and then you'd practice. So it kind of led sales managers or hiring managers to say, this guy's kind of got what we look for. The other thing I thought that was interesting in the class was golf caddies. Anybody who had caddied in mostly a private club, they thought would be potentially good sales reps, because you could listen, you had to listen, and you had to deal with different levels of people. You might be dealing with a CEO one day and then, a cop or a fireman the next. And I found that was pretty good advice too.
Yeah, I mean, you send over your bio, and I always said, getting great people and hiring great people is definitely a skill.
Absolutely.
And I always tell people that salespeople are the hardest people to hire and interview, in my
Yeah.
opinion, because their job is to sell, and you really have to peel away what's the real accomplishments versus the bullshit. Really,
Yep.
what are they portraying themselves to be? And so, I think you've told me, you interviewed over 2 to 3,000 people, 400 hires, and they're all sales hires, right? So
Yep.
what was your secret in terms of hiring salespeople, and how did you go about it? Because outside the athletic and obviously the sports minded people, you probably want the strong B player sports wise, because there's the ones that have to try harder. The naturally talented, not that
Yeah.
Michael Jordan would be applying to a sales position at LSI Logic or something, but it's probably the people that have to work hard.
I think good salespeople are susceptible to good salespeople. And
Right.
I was always susceptible to good salespeople, whether it was interviewing or, and I thought people that were prepared, you know, in the business casual days, I always appreciated something who would say, "Hey, Mr. McGovern, um, attire. I'd be happy to come in a suit and tie, whatever." And I said, "Well, we're casual Fridays, come in casual." Guy walks in with a Baltusrol shirt on, Baltusrol golf shirt.
Sure.
I'm like, "Oh wow, Baltusrol, do you play?" He goes, "Oh, I'm a member." Got my attention right away.
Right.
He knew because he called somebody and goes, "Hey, what do you know about Eastman McGovern?" He goes, "He likes to play golf. Pretty good golfer,
Yeah.
good guy." I worked for him. And the guy kind of knew me and knew what I was about and didn't have to spend all that time kind of getting a rapport, because we had one, because I'm looking at a Baltusrol shirt.
Right. Interesting.
The other thing I always looked at was, times really changed over the years, Jeff. I think in the beginning, the first 8 or 10 years, people who had 3 or 4 jobs in 5 or 6 years, people thought it was bad.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Well, I'd be saying, "Hey, why are you on your third job? Why did you only spend a couple of years here?" And once that thinking changed, I would ask people, "Hey, why are we here? And why are we looking here?" "Oh, my boss sucks. The accounts I have suck." So I was always interested in what was the reason that you were looking for a job. And the other thing I never did in, I don't know, 30 years as a man, I never once called a reference. I got references for people, but if you gave me 3 references, I didn't call them. I called other people in the industry,
Right.
people I knew, talked to end users. And one thing I would say was I was really blown away by this one guy. Knew everybody in New York City, had big time relationships, really, and did well. And I called a couple of blind references and I said, "Hey, what do you think about John?" He goes, "Yeah, John's a good guy." He goes, "He gets his party hat a little tight."
Mm.
I kind of knew what that meant, and called another guy. I said, "Hey, I'm talking to John, blah, blah, blah. What do you think of him?" He goes, "Yeah, really good before lunch."
Oh shit.
You know,
Yeah, the days
you're
of
going to go on calls
breaking
with
at
him.
lunch.
You,
Yeah.
you got to get him before lunch. And it turns out that the guy did kind of lose focus after lunch.
Mhm.
And I always thought referrals were good. Somebody who knew somebody, and you'd have to really think twice. If I hired a referral from you, I'm not looking at him. I'm looking at you.
Right.
And I think that kind of helped.
Yeah. Well, and we were I think the first generation not to have the job for life.
Yeah,
IBM,
absolutely.
AT&T, GE. That the generation before us. They would
Yeah,
work. Our parents and things like that. And I think we also we were on the last vestige of drinking, at least heavily at lunch,
yeah,
kind of the Mad Men, the end of the Mad Men.
yeah. It doesn't exist today.
Yeah, 100%. Interesting. So with the golfer, you did hire them, and how did he
I
work out?
did.
Yeah,
I did good.
yeah. Okay, good.
He ended up being a good rep, and
And who was a better golfer, you or him?
him, he was.
Well, and that's saying a lot. You were good.
Yeah.
You were definitely a good golfer.
They and later in life, I worked for an Italian guy named Flavio Santoni, and he was a good leader. But more than being a good leader, I don't know why, but he took an interest in me. He took an interest in a couple of things. He said was, we were at lunch with a customer, and he said, he had an Italian accent. He said, "Stop it drinking beer. Stop it." So I go, "Okay." He goes, "Have a martini. Look professional." And he said, "I want you to read this book, and I want to talk to you about the book." I said, "Okay." The book was called Building Relationships Through the Game of Golf. It was incredibly interesting, and essentially the end result of the book is, if somebody cheats you in golf, they're going to cheat you in business.
100%.
They're going to cheat in business.
100%.
They're going to. And as it turned out, Flavio and I played with a big executive, a company that I manage. We got about $150 million a year out of this guy, and he cheated. He just, and the guy we were with was so embarrassed about it. He just said, "What do you want me to put you down for?" So, that was, I think, one of the other phenomenons. As the drinking ended, the golf game, as a good way to spend professional relationship building, became golf, not drinking.
Right.
The Madman days, I think it was a lot of drinking,
Yes.
and it moved to golf.
Mm-hmm. And you didn't really. I just recall one golf. I did not golf growing up. There was one time during senior week where we flipped over a card at Van Cortlandt Golf Course, but that's for another podcast. But you didn't play much golf growing up, did you?
No. You know why I started playing golf?
After you read the book.
No. I started playing golf when I was working. My first job out of school was at IBM, and I noticed nobody was in the office on Friday. I'm like, "Hey, where are these guys?" "Oh, they've got customer golf." I go, "What?" I go, "No, they bring their customers out to play golf." And I was a kid rep. If my business expense was more than $50, I had to get it approved.
Oh, jeez.
I literally had to get it approved that I could take somebody out there. And I was like, this is some bullshit going on here. I'm in here till 7, 8 o'clock at night. These guys are, and that's why I started playing.
Yeah. Interesting. That was very similar to me when I was at Sprint in their consumer services group for long distance. Same thing. People were leaving Friday afternoons. I'm like, where's everybody? They were golfing. So I'm like, I'm going to start playing. But I didn't really pick it up till I was in my low 30s.
I also think it's probably true in today's day and age. If you're good, or you don't have to be good, but you have to be, you have to know the rules and play quick and be enjoyable.
Right.
If you're cursing and throwing, nobody wants to play with you.
Right.
But like our mutual, like Mark Sievers, I mean, if you're a good player, and depending what industry your career is in, enormous opportunity.
100%.
An enormous opportunity, right, just by being having good etiquette and, being kind of outgoing.
Yeah. There's actually a lot of women's group in Kansas City that actually are, teaching women
Yep.
golf and business, because a lot of it is scrambles where you're, not hitting your own ball. And,
Yep.
a really good women player helps that
Yeah.
immensely. So interesting. Let's talk about IBM. Like, you were one of the few people in college that actually had an internship during the semester. And tell everybody how that came about and how that shaped kind of the beginning of your career. Obviously got a job with IBM, but
Basketball. Guy shows up Sunday night at Dratty Gym. Mary Jane, I can't remember, Mary Beth Fallon's brother said, hey, I went here, my sister told me, I asked for you. I had no idea what the guy did. We used to play basketball Sunday night, just up in the gym. Coming around April or May, he goes, what are you going to do for the summer? I don't know. Hope I don't have to go back to Staten Island. But he said, blah, blah, blah. Come in, talk to this woman. And luckily, before I got there, Mark met me out in the lobby, and I was in a tan leisure suit. A leisure suit.
Oh, yeah. Don't get too close to flames.
And he was like, oh, man, this isn't going to work. And I said, no, you need like a blue suit or something. Eastman, I said, I don't have one. I said, can you borrow one? Can you get one? We'll reschedule. So I said, yeah, I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out. I can't remember who in the door my bar, but I had to borrow a suit and go down. So I did that for the summer. And it was a lot of grunt work. It was a lot of work nobody wanted to do. Sure. It was, my God, going through pages and pages of documentation and picking out what terminal a customer needed. And because I did it, I guess, pretty good, they were like, hey, you want to keep doing it? Because nobody else wanted to do it.
Right.
Who the hell wants to go through, check this, 8 feet, we need an 8-foot cable. No grown man wanted to do that. So I think I got to stay on 2 reasons. One, I wasn't a pain in the ass, really. I just came and went. But I didn't really complain about it. And the key thing was minimum wage back then was $4.05 an hour. IBM was paying me $9.70. So I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I tell my kids, my first job was $9.70 an hour.
Unbelievable.
Like, wow. I go, hey, minimum wage was $4.05. You're working in food services in Manhattan, they're paying you $4.05.
Incredible. Well, and when we graduated, it was 82, one of the worst recessions, if not the worst one of all time.
Absolutely.
And actually, I was supposed to work for IBM, and it was because I interviewed with 6 managers. The one called me back immediately. Obviously no cell phones at my mom's house, and said, I really want you. You'll hear from HR in a week. If you don't, call me back. And he really liked me because IBM had a company football team, intermediate.
There you go.
So anyhow, I took an interview between the time of that call and the week. It was the day after Memorial Day, and it was with AT&T, a whole day interview for their management training program in software development. And I almost did it on a lark. I figured, well, it's a free lunch. It was the day after Memorial Day, which is not, usually the best day to interview. But I'm like, I did it, but I was very relaxed. I did have to take a software aptitude test. I did pass it, obviously, and they had no openings. And I said, that's fine. They said, are you willing to relocate? I said, sure. But I'm thinking I got a job with IBM, and IBM had their first hiring freeze in their history in '82.
Wow.
Yeah. So I did end up in Kansas City at AT&T.
I get asked a lot, was my lifetime objective, was my goal to get into sales? You all, hell no. I got hired at IBM before we finished school, $16,800. I was my offer was AAS, Administrative Account Specialist. Well, what?
AAS or ASS?
Well, I was an ASS, but Administrative Account Specialist. That was it, AAS.
Wow.
And I got sent to training in Atlanta, Georgia. And they were quads. There were 4 people in your quad. However, there was all sorts of different training going on. Engineering, sales. I was in the administrative account.
Wow.
Well, but the third day, one of my suite mates gets called up, got sent home. Sent him home. Was out one night, the club was doing something he didn't do. And
wow.
They made an example of him in front of the guy, sent him home. Well, week 2 of my 3-week training, I get called up. And the guy says, you need to call your branch manager, Don Snyder. He needs to speak to you right away. Like, oh, shit, what the hell did I do? Oh, my God. I go, pick up the phone. Didn't even have my name right. He goes, Eastern. This is Don Snyder, branch manager. Hi. Oh, Mr. Snyder, how are you? He says, look, we got to make this real quick, but I've got a sales opening here. And based on some aptitudes, and people in the office think you might be pretty good at it. So I want to convert you from a AAS to a sales rep 1. And okay. So I said, could you tell me a little bit about it? And he goes, well, the salary's $19,200. Sold. I go, wow. I go, I came back. And people look at me like, everything all right? I go, I just got 20% raise. Well, I mean, that's how I ended up in it.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. So you've had an unbelievable career in IT and in the tech space. So what were some of your kind of highlights? I'd like to hear about, you've worked for Fortune 500, you work for, startups, you've been involved in IPOs and, mergers and acquisitions. So it's kind of,
Sure. I think early on, I had 3 or 4 or 5 different jobs. And I think the reason I liked what I did was because the money was good. But I put so much pressure on me, and I was always chasing a dollar. That was it. And I thought everything kind of revolved around me and my work and how much work I made. The one thing I would have changed would have been to get mentors earlier. We used to call them rabbis back in the day. You have a rabbi who looks after you. But I had a couple of rabbis who, for whatever reason, I still don't know to this day, took an interest in me. And once I learned that the company you work for has to do good by you. They have to do well by you just as much as you do well by them. I didn't realize that till I was 10 years into work. I didn't realize it was a career, Jeff.
Right.
I thought it was a job and a way to make money.
Right.
It's not. It's a career. It's a lifestyle.
Right.
And once I kind of realized that, I'm giving you 40 hours a week of good effort, not great effort. I'm giving you really good effort. It's your responsibility as a company. You got to define products better. You got to engineer different products. You're expecting me to go out and sell pencils when everybody else has a pencil. So once I got to a company that did that had really well engineered and differentiated products, shit, it was easy to sell. Shooting fish in a barrel.
And what was that company?
Storage Dimensions.
Okay.
It was my first entrance into the storage business, which, by the way, knock on wood, for the last 20 years has been the greatest industry in the world.
Right.
I mean, movies, all that is stored. Everything is stored. The data explosion. But Storage Dimensions looked at it like, I got to build a better mousetrap. And I had a year where my earnings almost tripled because they had a product nobody else had. Back to the Novell Network days,
Right.
long time. People will call, I mean, imagine being a sales guy. That's when John came to work for me. And Bear Stearns and Goldman Sachs, I was in New York, Merrill Lynch, these sons of bitches are calling you.
Right.
Hey, Jeff, can you come in and talk to me about this? And I kind of learned a little bit about storage, and it had a different decision-making criteria. And at that same time, one of these rabbis had said, you got to build relationships. You gotta build business relationships. And that's what we tried to do. But if you're all in, you want the company all in with you, you know, and it's different type of things. You can work for a company and you go out to corporate and they're putting you up at the Motel 6, telling you to eat at McDonald's. Hey, grab some McDonald's on the way here. That's,
Right.
you know, and then when companies who treat you good and treat you respectfully, but I think that was for me such a big learning experience because it taught me to not only have relationships outside of work, you need a relationship with an engineering manager. You know, when you come out to corporate, you better go out to the production facility and buy everybody pizza and beer. Because you know what's going to happen? One Friday at the end of the month, you're going to want something shipped.
Right.
You're going to want it shipped
Before
because you're
5
in
o'clock.
and you're going to want it shipped because you're in double commission accelerators. And
Right.
if this thing ships, it's about $10,000. If it ships Monday, it's about $2,000. So we kind of learned, or I learned, that you got to have friends everywhere.
Right.
And, you know, it's okay to throw out a couple of your own dollars and buy pizza and buy, but, you know, you could call up the production guys on a Friday and like, hey, I got to get this shipped.
Got to do it. Quota. So yeah, so I think you're referring a lot about culture. So did you see a correlation between the CEO and his or her personality and what the culture was like? Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I think the exec staff or the leadership of a company takes on the personality of the CEO or the founder. You know, I've had CEOs who would go out and have drinks with you, and you know, party's not the right word, but they would be entertaining. They would go out and be entertaining. So was his exec staff. You know, they took on their person. The CEO was stoic in all business. Well, people were all business.
Right.
But the sales teams, for me, always took on the personality of their leader. Not the VP of sales, not the president, their direct boss.
Right.
And, you know, if he looked the other way, and he, you know, cheated on his expenses, or if he, you know, put in an extra 100 miles, they did.
Right.
And I think culture My last 6 years were a company called NetApp. They acquired LSI. They talked about culture. They gave every employee an extra day off if they came in the top 25 places to work. They were very focused on it. 5 days to volunteer, 5 volunteer days, free fruit, high-end coffee makers in the room. You wouldn't think that meant a lot. It did. It kept you from going out to get coffee.
Right.
Like when I worked in New York, I was always going to Starbucks or walking out. Something that take you 45 minutes. You didn't have to do that at NetApp. It's all right here.
Right.
So I would say the first 20 years I worked, I never would have thought culture made a difference. Last 10, 15 years, I think it does make a difference.
Yeah, I think it's especially important now, and we can get into a whole conversation about the pandemic and how that changed the work life and obviously remote work and things like that. Did you see in terms of the culture? So I think sometimes home offices have resentment towards sales, and I think sometimes home offices, headquarters embrace sales. The latter is usually the better. But did you see examples of that throughout your career with the many different companies you work for?
Yeah, I think you have to trust people, but you also can't be afraid to cut the cord. Somebody
Right.
tells you they're working at home, and there's ways to check.
Right.
There's ways to check. You want in sales, or in what I did, you want a culture of accountability. And I always believed, and there are people who disagree with me on this, but I always believed in the sales arena, but in business in general, people want to be led.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be managed.
I agree.
They want leadership. They 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 want a relationship with you inside and sometimes outside of work. But people want to be led. They want to be managed. And whether they're remote or in the office, you have to manage them. And when you go out to corporate, or if you've got a senior enough position where you're a corporate all the time, people take notice. They take notice that you have to manage people. Like I haven't, somebody told me once, I haven't talked to my boss in 3 weeks. I'm like, what? What? He goes, no, I haven't talked to my boss in 3 weeks. He goes, I used to talk to you 3 times a day. I go, well, not three. He goes, Eastman, 3 times a day you would call me. I go, well, at the end of the quarter, I would. The end of the month, I
Where
would.
are you? Where are you
Yeah.
at? That's crazy. Well, yeah, one of my companies, Eritana, there was one of our executives was remote, and the person that worked for her didn't talk to her for weeks on end. I was like, how can that be possible?
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's just
Oh God. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I sometimes you see resentment, like especially with finance, accounting. They say
absolutely.
salespeople make so much money, blah
Yep.
blah blah. I go, yeah, but this is what makes money for all of us here, right? But they don't understand that. They
And
just see
a lot of,
salaries.
I would say, really the last 10 or 15 years, sales has always had club trips, president's clubs, whatever you want to call it. Make your quota, overachieve your quota, be one of the top 100 guys. You get to go on a nice trip. But 10 or 15 years ago, that changed. You started allowing other people to come. Salespeople could nominate people. So you'd have marketing people, you'd have customer service people, you'd have accounting people. And I think that changed the club trip because goddamn people hated club trips. Oh, how was Hawaii? How was it? Was it nice? You guys were in Hawaii last week for a club trip. How was it? It was nice. It was all right. Hey, you guys, how was that sales meeting you guys had? It must have been nice, huh? You guys are, yeah, it was. nice. So, you know, you have to reel it in a little bit. But now I think that when a NetApp or a Cisco, when they do club trips, they allow other people to be nominated or to earn part of the trip.
Yeah.
But there's always, you know, the side eye of sales guys. And you know what, too? Some of it we brought on ourselves by going out to corporate and leaving at 3 o'clock on Thursday.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know?
Well, and I think, you know, President's Club trips are different from, you know, like national sales meetings. You know, we'd always go to nice places for national sales meetings, and, you know, people would say, oh, you were just in San Diego or, you know, wherever we went. And I'm like, it must have been great. I'm like, no, I'm literally on from 7 a.m. to midnight, and I'm
Yep.
exhausted when I come home. I'm like, you know, like I'm talking work basically
Yep.
for the whole time.
Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, what are some what's the craziest thing a customer asked you to do?
Wow. I've had over the years a lot of hire my kid,
Okay.
you know,
All right.
not a lot of, but some around tickets to sporting events.
Yeah. Major sporting events, probably.
Super Bowl when it was in the Meadowlands,
Right.
5 or 6 customer, you know, hey, we can move this PO into the quarter, you know.
Right.
But the craziest thing that ever happened in front of a customer was when I worked at Hayes, my first real management job,
Yeah.
real big quota.
And Hayes is the
Rep,
one you were out in Portland, Lake Oswego. That was that Hayes?
no, yeah, I relocated out there with the same guy,
Okay.
but it was the modem guys.
Okay.
And Jerry, his wife was a high-end recruiter, you know, big contract recruiter. So I got an appointment at Goldman Sachs of all places. I mean, I'm managing sales guys 3 weeks, a month. We go and I get up on a whiteboard and blah, 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 blah. You couldn't sniff $1 million deal back then. You couldn't sniff it. This deal's $1,200,000. And the guy's like, you know, we need to get these as soon as we can. How soon can you get these? We go to get up and leave, and his briefcase pulls back. This son of a bitch took the guy's work directory,
Oh, jeez.
put it in his briefcase to give to his wife.
Oh, jeez.
Guy called the cops,
Oh my God.
wanted to have us arrested. It was insane. My office was in White Plains. I took the train. We were in one of the shared office facilities, and she can't get out of her mouth fast enough. Mr. McGovern, you need to call Dennis Hayes. Dennis Hayes has called you, and he wants you to know that it's him calling, nobody else. I called him up. Dennis Hayes, the modem's named after the guy.
Right. He's the founder.
Yeah. What the hell happened? First thing I said was, I had nothing to do with this. And he goes, well, you can't, first of all, you can't work here anymore. I go, wait, Dennis, I had nothing to do with this. Nothing. This guy evidently took why would he do that? I said, because his wife's a headhunter. So, I mean, they kept their eye on me for a while, but I kept thinking to myself, nothing crazy could ever happen. But I never had somebody ask for money, you know, like a kickback. I've had a couple of customers abuse the entertainment, you know, try to order a $400 or $500 bottle of wine. You know, a guy hasn't eaten steak in 2 years. He wants to have a 48-ounce tomahawk and one to go. So, you got to, and look, the only way you learn how to maneuver that is experience.
Right.
They don't teach you in sales school when the guy orders the $400 bottle of wine and the steak. They don't tell you how to handle that.
Did you ever have the guy, and I'm going to say guy because it would never be a woman because women are more evolved than men, but did you ever have the guy at dinner that ordered multiple entrees, not to take home, but the
Yeah.
actual,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that was always incredible.
Yeah.
Um, one
And
time
then you got to eventually you got to hand in the expense rate. You got to hand it in.
exactly. One time when I was selling for IntelliQuest, I took a prospect who I knew I had worked with at Sprint PCS to Pelican Hill Golf Course in Newport Beach. Beautiful course,
You
very
played there, very
high-end.
nice.
It's
Yeah.
$300 to play.
They call it Pebble Beach South.
Yes, 100%. It's beautiful. I mean, the view is incredible. So we finish up, I buy him lunch. We're, having a couple beers while we're playing. So, we're going to his car to put his clothes in. So I hadn't noticed all day, but he had a Pelican Bay, bag tag. I go, how did you get one of these? He goes, oh, so-and-so brought me out last week. He played with my competitor the week before the same course.
No.
I literally called him a vendor rapist. I go, you're a rapist. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah,
Yeah. So like Eastman, you've led so many people, but you were one of the first people I know that got really into the LGBTQ era, I'll call it. I mean, and you'll walk me through the story, but if I recall correctly, you had somebody that worked for you or someone on your team that went through a sex change operation. And I had never, I mean, I knew it could occur, but I had never heard anyone in the workplace had anybody work for them while they were doing it. That was the first time. Yeah.
I spent most of my career in Silicon Valley headquarters. I didn't work there, but I spent a lot of time traveling to and from. So I had some gay people work for me, and I had a guy who worked for me 11 years, Jeff, reported to me for 11 years. And I don't know, I always found him a little odd. And he didn't drink. So I thought maybe it was, this is at time an alcohol intensive business, kickoffs, sales.
Sure.
And I said, probably that, struggles maybe drinking, doesn't drink, maybe whatever reason. Then I got a call, from an outside attorney who was contracted with NetApp. We had 11,800 employees at the time. I'm going to say that again, 11,800 employees at that time. And she said, one of your employees is transitioning. I said, to a new job? To a new role? No, transitioning. Never heard the word before. Never. And the gal in HR who I considered a friend of mine, the outside attorney said, well, I'm sure you know what this is about. And I said, I have no idea. And the woman in HR was so taken back. So she goes, I forgot to tell him. He has no idea. And they explained it. One of my direct reports was going to transition to a woman. And we had never had that before. Just under 12,000 employees in Silicon Valley. Kind of surprising in today's day and age that we never had anybody. We had no policy, nothing. And for him at the time, we weren't offering any financial help or anything. And he was bitter, very, very bitter, threatening lawsuits. And, he and I came to an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding between the two of us. And I said, I'm going to run this all the way up CEO. We need to understand each other. So you'll be him until we break for Christmas break. And then you do what you have to do, and we'll announce it while you're out. But come to work as him, and da da da. Next goddamn day, shows up in a dress and a wig. And it was difficult for everybody.
Sure.
And we had to develop a policy. And I went to a class out in California, and this is not for comical effect. This really happened. And I went out to the class, and the instructor, the first day, came over and said, "Oh, you must be Eastman. We missed you last night." They had a little reception. And I said, "Yeah, I came in from New York." And she goes, "You're very early in your transition." I said, I'm not transitioning." She goes, "This is a class all week for transitioning in the workplace." I go, "Well, I'm not transitioning. I have somebody that's doing it." And I wanted to leave. And, I called corporate. I ended up with the CEO. Somebody went and got me on the phone with me, and, he laughed, laughed a little bit, and he said, "Do me a favor, stay. We got to get our arms around this, Eastman. We, you're at the we're at the forefront. You're at the forefront. We gotta come up with a policy. We gotta understand this." And I stayed the whole week, and part of it was incredibly rewarding, but also part of it was very sad. How people struggled.
No, I'm sure.
Maybe some for 5 years, some for 10 years, some their entire life. But right before I left, we had finalized NetApp's policy on transgender and transitioning in the workforce.
Wow.
And I think it's more common, Jeff, today.
Oh yeah.
Than it was when we started.
Oh yeah, 100%. Actually, my last year at Boehringer Ingelheim, they put in, which would have been 2013. That year, they actually paid for changing genders. They paid for the whole process.
Gender reassignments, yeah, GRS, yeah.
Yeah, wow. I just remember that, and you were the first person I ever knew of that had to go through that and had somebody have the change while working for them. So
while working and calling on customers,
right?
I mean, in a customer-facing role,
right? Did you lose any customers based on that?
Yeah,
Was it
we did. We lost. Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Most customers said, "Can't happen anymore. This can't be happening. You assign me a new rep. You need to assign me a new rep." I said, "We can't do that." I said, it's illegal. And he said, "Eastman, we're gonna have to, we'll find another vendor, but this won't work here." Now, she eventually went to work. She's still there. She eventually went to work for IBM.
Okay.
Bigger company, more programs, more inclusive. And last time I talked to her was maybe a year ago. There were over 100 people at IBM who have transitioned. Right. 75 transitioned while there.
Wow.
She did not transition at IBM, but she,
So, again, your career has been fantastic from that. You've done so many things, you've been involved in so many things. So you were also in the internet boom and bust period with, I believe, Sitesmith, because
very true.
Yeah. So tell a little bit about that and how that evolved, and
Well, yeah,
how did SiteSmith compare to other companies? Because obviously it was a startup.
yeah, SiteSmith was really the first startup I worked for. I mean, incredibly well funded, but these two guys, they were younger than I was, you know, had this vision of the office as a meeting place. All the other vendors in the internet space could get together, share leads, share deals. We had a bar in the office, Jeff, kegs of beer,
Yeah.
desks on wheels. I'm like, where's my office? I'm going to run this shit show and there's no office. Well, you have an office, but my walls are on wheels. And everybody's getting funded. I didn't know what the hell getting funded meant was,
Right.
but I had a bunch of prior relationships. And I was talking to my son about this, and it was almost like Bitcoin. Because people would say, I know you got a big time relationship at 1-800-Flowers, Eastman. I know you do. Well, how do you know that? That's what such and such told me. So and so. I said, yeah, what do you want? He goes, we're going public in 3 weeks. We're going to give you some friends and family stock. I'm going to give you some friends and family. I need you to take me out to 1-800-Flowers and meet the McCanns.
Mm-hmm.
There's all sorts of that horse trading going on.
Right.
You want to go here, I'll take you here. Oh, get friends and family. And I'll give you the very short version, the 90-second version, but I had a guy that I was very friendly with named Mike, we'll say Mike B, who worked for a company called SNI, Storage Networks Incorporated. Took the internet by storm. Tremendous concept. Tremendous idea of sharing storage. Putting ginormous amounts of storage in these data centers and sharing them so nobody has to buy their own. Fantastic. They raised about $180 million in funding. Could have raised more, but they didn't want to raise any more. They go in public. Mike says, Peter wants to give you a double share of friends and family. I go, a double share? I won't tell you how many shares it was, but they went public at 36, closed that day at 106. 90% of the people who had friends and family sold that day. Yours truly would have also sold that day, but my account number was at home.
Oh, jeez.
So I'm calling the house. Hey, I didn't. I sent the president a bottle of Dom Perignon. I sent Mike a bottle of Dom Perignon. I ran into them months later, and Mike goes, "Hey, Dom, how you doing?" And Peter said, we gave a lot of friends and family. You're the only son of a bitch that called and thanked me. I know it was a voicemail, but you sent me a bottle. I ran across Mike Bodette so many other times in deals. I mean, in deals. When I was at LSI, our biggest account was Storage Tech, and they're blowing up, Jeff. They're blowing up, and they have a big national sales meeting. And Flavio, we went out, and Flavio says, "This Mike guy is he's a prick." Oh, who? He goes, Mike B. What are you talking about? I go, what are you talking about? He goes, Mike B. I go, I know Mike. He's a friend of mine. He goes, you know this guy? Yeah, I know this guy. Goes, he won't return calls. I heard we're out. They're throwing us out, blah, 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 blah. We're walking into the hotel where the meeting is. And Mike's, he goes, Jesus Christ, Eastman came over. He knew right away what was going on. He knew. And he was like, you know what? He goes, Flavio, you got this guy working for you? You guys are all right. You guys are safe. He goes, Mike, we've been trying to call you for a meeting. He goes, I've been waiting Eastman. I wanted to talk to Eastman first and get a lay of the land. So you never know where a relationship, same thing with headhunters, you know. My son's going through a little bit of it now. I said, return the calls. You'll never, you'll never know.
Right. Yeah, it's just so true. Mark Sievers, when he was on the podcast, had a very similar story, how he treated the assistant grocery manager, so kind. His family would drop off cookies and crackers, and the guy became like second in charge of AWG, a $8 billion grocery store distribution. I mean, and he would want Mark to be at these meetings where like this third in
Senior,
command,
right?
And it's just doing the right thing and building relationships, and
it's
people
kindly. They're not as prevalent today as they used to be, but headhunters. I used to use headhunters to my advantage all the time, and somebody had asked me once and said, Harvey Bass is an asshole. I go, Harvey Bass is very good at what Harvey Bass does. So if you can get a headhunter, if you had a back in the day now, if you had a relationship with a headhunter, they saved me immeasurable pain. Because I got a rep, Mary Jones, who's no good. I got to get Mary out. I can't fire Mary. How do I manipulate to get Mary somewhere else where I can get somebody that can be productive? And I call my guy and say, hey, here's the deal. You got to help me move somebody, and you get the fee on the next guy coming in. Guess how long it took him to find Mary a job?
1 day.
Because you get paid twice.
Right.
Harvey placed me at LSI.
Okay. Wow.
And from the day I got there, I hated it. It's horrible. I worked for a guy who was horrible, terrible. Used to take everything I did and put his name on it. Had me write weekly reports in the third person. So I'm on a conference call and he's repeating something that I did. So I'll never forget, it was a Friday. And I called Harvey and I said, look, Harvey, I need to get out of here. Not a good fit. And he's like, can't do that. I go, why? Because you got a 6 months guarantee on me? He goes, no. Here's my home number. Call me at home. I said, Harvey, with or without you, I'm getting out of here. I can't. This is not. So I called him at home. And he said, I got a call from Mike, who was a VP of worldwide sales at the time. And I said, yeah, it doesn't pertain. He goes, well, he's removing your boss next Wednesday because I placed him in a new job. Wow. He does what you do. I found him a new job. And when I said to him, good, I'll start working on his replacement. He said, I already got his replacement. I said, who are you replacing him with? He said, Eastman McGovern. So you find another Eastman to replace Eastman. But you better find another Eastman. That was the longest job I had, 16 years.
Wow.
I would have left.
Right. Wow.
Now, Harvey broke every ethical rule in the book.
The old school recruiters.
But the old school recruiters.
Oh, geez.
Hey, this guy's looking. Hey. So it's amazing how many people I think that you can touch in your career that can help you or hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
So I always used to tell people, how do you get ahead? People will be, how do you get ahead? How do you get ahead? my one thing, and John Walsh used to quote me all. I said, "Be a nice guy. Be a nice guy. No, just try to be a nice guy,
Yeah.
and just understand that, like with Mark, second in command isn't always going to be second in command."
Right. Yeah, one of the quotes I really enjoy that I found out later in my career was, when you have a choice to be right or kind, choose kindness.
True. Yeah.
Because it's not
Absolutely.
about being right.
Yep.
So, again, incredible career, but you were involved in one of the worst tragic things that ever happened in the United States of America.
Oh, yeah.
9/11. Walk us through your day at 9/11, and our good friend John Welch was a part of that too, because you guys worked together. But walk us through that.
I'm not a very religious person. I think I believe in God. But, John and I worked for a startup, um, incredibly well funded, and the company was going to be something in the IT software space. Definitely, based on the backers, the early product, the level of acceptance, and CEO was a younger guy, and he wanted to be in New York. He wanted to do business with Goldman Sachs and Merrill Lynch and Lehman and Bear Stearns. He thought that was the way to make it and to IPO quickly. So he hired me, did an exhaustive background check on me, which I thought was weird. And I brought John on, and we brought on one of our old SEs, and we were in 2 World Trade Center, shared office space. And it was such a good, it wasn't like an HQ that I always thought HQs, it was such a well managed company out of London where they answered the phone, and the coffee office and the common, there were a lot of tech people, there were a lot of startups and a lot of small tech companies. And for me, living in Long Island at the time was a pain in the ass to get there. I loved going to work. It was just, guys were like, "Hey, did you know that Goldman was looking?" And just a lot of camaraderie and going on. And the company on 9/11 was having an annual picnic out in California. And they asked John and I to come out. John didn't want to go because his oldest, it was his first day of school. And John decided not to go. We would have not traveled we would have traveled the day before. And I had some medical issues at the time. I had some arthritis that was pretty bad, and I was moving over. And we were both on our way to work when they fell. So we were not there. But knowing people who lost their lives, and one thing that is not easy to say, it's a miracle, an absolute miracle, that only 3,300 people died.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a miracle.
Yeah.
And our entire floor that we shared the office with tried to leave, and the fire marshal said no. Told them, "No, stay." So everybody that was in the office that day on our floor perished, died.
Yeah.
And it became, I guess, 5, 6, 7 months of just daily hearing somebody else that died,
Mm-hmm.
that died. Now, there were some enterprising people, a couple of which I still know today, who started 9/12 selling stuff. Don't worry about a PO. Don't worry about anything. You guys got to get up and running. Tell me what you need. Tell me what you need.
Right. Wow.
It became a kinder, gentler city, but the IT space, just nobody knew how to react because you've got Solomon Brothers as your account. Their entire data center blew up. Not an office.
Right.
You got $1 million quota and you got to sell them $14-15 million of product to get back up and running. Sales guys were like, well, they don't want to pay. There was really a lot of discussion among salespeople, sales managers. How do you handle it? And how do you not from an IT, but how do you prevent it again? You got Penn Station, 900 trains coming in every day. You can't check every single train.
Right.
Other than John, my 3 best reps left. Their wives made them leave. Moved down to New York.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just an unbelievable story. And I still recall, you couldn't get phone service, but I called you immediately. I had a dentist appointment that day. I got out of it and I called you, and crazy that I even connected with you. That we talked, and I remember you just being so distraught. Obviously, because you've been in a
yeah. Customers you built your professional careers around, guys who you knew. I want to say some personally, but mostly professionally, that you spent time building relationships with are no longer around. How do you call the wife and say, I'm so sorry that John died? Well, who are you? Well, I was a storage vendor for 12 years.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's you just can't imagine. And I know you went to many funerals and wakes for months afterwards. So,
and it's kind of like the phone call I got on an employee transitioning. There's no experience. The only way you learn to do it is, and by the way, you're gonna make mistakes. It's not something they teach you. They don't teach in college. They don't teach in grad school. They don't teach in sales training or any type of training. How do you deal with it?
Yeah.
Try to figure it out.
Yep. Same thing with COVID, right?
Yep.
The whole
Yeah.
pivoting.
I mean, and that today, I thought, it took me 2 or 3 years to learn how to manage remote salespeople. Make sure they're productive, call logs, and
right.
I don't know how people are maneuvering today.
Right. Well, I think the final, it's kind of a 2-part question. What advice would you have to just a recent person, whether that's out of college or making a transition into sales? What would one thing you would want to know when you just started out? And then kind of a similar question, but once you became a sales leader, what would have helped you kind of become a better leader sooner?
I think the first thing is be prepared for your interview. Be prepared. Know about the company, know what they've done. Don't be afraid to name drop that. Hey, I noticed that you guys have a new VP of engineering. Hey, I saw that you guys moved your London. Let the interviewer know that you know what's going on. And when you do get there, find a mentor. Find somebody that will show you the ropes, somebody that will teach you what everybody else won't.
The
how
rabbi.
to do, find a rabbi. And I'm going to say something now, but I'm going to contradict myself when I talk about sales leadership roles. Don't be afraid to change jobs. In the beginning, don't. Better product, better compensation plan, more convenient to commute. And know that it's not just you. That was my problem when I first started. I wish I came to the realization that the company is as big a part of my success as I am.
Right.
For too long, I thought when I wasn't successful, I thought I was doing something wrong. And a lot of times I was. But a lot of times the company weren't engineering. They weren't developing. Network. The other thing I wish I learned, network. You're selling storage and you're selling to Merrill Lynch. You can't sell to Goldman Sachs. You're trying to get in. You can't. You know what? Find the guy who's selling printers. Get friendly with him. Frustrate a little bit. Network in the industry.
Right.
Network outside of the industry. And touch as many people inside your company as you can. When you go out to corporate for sales training or you go out there to take a customer, meet people. And sales leadership, lead. Hold people accountable. Don't be afraid to call somebody out on the carpet. First time I did it, I remember saying, it happened to be a female. I don't think that's important in the story, but I asked her about a deal. I said, I need an update. She goes, blah, blah, blah. I said, you know something, Mary? One of two things has happened. Customers lying to you, or you're lying to me. In the next 45 minutes, I'm going to find out what it is. Because I'm going to grab my bag and walk down the street. So she goes, well, I'll save you the walk because I lost that deal 3 weeks ago. Get to know people,
Yeah, that's what I was
Know
going
their
to say. You could hold them accountable because you cared about them as people, right?
Exactly. Yeah. No, know the kids, know what's going on in their life. And contradictory to what I said before, don't change jobs. They tell you as a sales manager, I had to learn this the hard way, and which is why I got to spend 16 years in a spot. They tell you the grass is always greener. You know why? There's more horse shit over there. There's more manure. That's why. Everything ever told to me in an interview for a sales management role or a VP job or a second, third line manager, none of it turned out to be true.
Well, Eastman, it's been a pleasure. God, what a great career.
Great.
And I not only,
Had a lot of fun doing it too.
Yeah, you've been one of my closest friends, and I cherish and I'm grateful for our friendship. All right, you're the best.
See you, buddy.
See you. I just love the episode with Eastman. Out of all the people I've interviewed to date, I've known Eastman the longest period of time. And the thing about Eastman and all his friends and work colleagues will tell you, he has a story for everything. Like any event, any situation, Eastman has a story for. But he has an unbelievable career in the tech space. I mean, working for Hayes Modem with Dennis Hayes, the founder. That was the early Silicon Valley type rock star entrepreneur CEOs. So I just thought it was phenomenal. Joe, what were your thoughts on the episode?
The one thing that I was thinking of when Eastman was talking about his leisure suit that he had on his interview made me remember back to when actually about the time that you first met me. I was a consultant for Capgemini. And when I first interviewed with Capgemini to get that job that you met me on, it was interesting because I didn't know it at the time, but I already had the job based on the merits of my resume. They had already decided to hire me. And they'd already gone to the client and promised me that I was going to start working the next Monday. So they were in a little bit of a bind. That is, they had just promised the client a consultant that they hadn't hired yet. And so they were pretty much committed to hiring me. I didn't realize that at the time, but when I went into the interview, I would have really had to do something stupid to mess up that interview. So I went in there and I wanted to make a great impression. So I was wearing my very, very best brown polyester suit from JCPenney. It was brown coat, brown pants, brown socks, brown shoes, and a real shiny brown tie. And I was so proud of that brown suit that I was wearing. And I went in there and sat down with the regional manager for the Kansas City area of Capgemini. And he looked at me, and the first thing he said was, well, the first thing we're going to have to do is get you out of that suit. So the rest of the interview, I suppose, went okay. I got the job. And then I had to go back to Bannister Mall to the JCPenney and buy 2 of their very best gray suits. And I alternated those 2 gray suits, wearing them on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday and Thursday for the next 3 years at that client. Wore the same 2 suits, just alternating them every other day. Luckily, we don't have those kind of challenges today, but in 1989, that's the kind of thing that I had to worry about.
Yeah, it's incredible for our younger generation listeners. Yes, we wore suits every day to work, so interesting time. In terms of any leadership wisdom you want to impart on the viewers?
Yeah, I'm always reminded of the quote from the great philosopher Stanley Hudson. One time when he said, "I have been trying to get on jury duty every year since I was 18 years old. To get to go sit in an air-conditioned room downtown judging people while my lunch is paid for, that is the life."
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.